3 years had passed since first contact, and the galaxy was beginning to regret ever finding humanity. What had started as a simple diplomatic mission had turned into something that kept council members awake at night, wondering what the humans would do next. It had begun small. A Zerani trade ship had visited Earth to establish basic commerce relations, hoping that economic ties might make the humans more cooperative. The ship had carried examples of Zerani technology, including their famous energy shields that could stop any known weapon. The humans had been polite, asked many questions, and purchased several shield generators at fair prices. 6 months later, human engineers announced they had figured out how the shields worked. Not only that, but they had improved the design by 40% and began selling their version to anyone who wanted to buy one. The Zerani filed 17 official complaints with the Council, but there was nothing in galactic law that prevented a species from improving technology they had legally purchased. This was just the beginning. The Vorath Imperium had been the dominant military power in the galaxy for 8,000 years. Their reptilian warriors were feared across 100 star systems, and their battle fleet was the largest ever assembled. When they heard about the human situation, they laughed. Surely these soft, small creatures were no real threat. Then the humans made contact with the Fenwick, a small species that had been conquered by the Vorath 2 centuries earlier. No one knew exactly what the humans said to them, but within a year, the Fenwick had launched a rebellion that tied up half the Vorath military. When the Vorath investigated, they discovered that humans had been secretly supplying the Fenwick with weapons, training, and something called motivational posters that featured pictures of cats with encouraging messages. The Kethany Merchant Guild was the next to feel the human impact. They had controlled trade routes through the central galaxy for 3,000 years, setting prices and collecting fees from anyone who wanted to move goods through their space. Humans looked at their operation and decided it was, in their words, a scam. Within 2 years, human traders had established alternative routes that bypassed Kethany space entirely, cutting their profits by 60%. But the incident that truly terrified the Council involved the mindless swarm. The swarm was exactly what its name suggested. A vast collective of insect-like creatures that operated as a single mind spread across millions of bodies. They had no concept of individuality, no understanding of personal desires, and no interest in anything beyond consumption and expansion. They had been a threat to galactic civilization for 10,000 years, held in check only by constant military vigilance. Somehow, impossibly, the humans had convinced the swarm to form a labor union. High Commander Zeranak of the Vorath Imperium called an emergency session aboard the battle station Dominance. The station was so large that it had its own weather patterns, and the war chamber at its center could hold representatives from every species in the Council. Today, 37 different species had sent delegates, their holographic forms filling the massive room. Zeranak stood at the center, her green scales darkening with anger as she addressed the assembly. The humans have violated 17 articles of the Galactic Compact. They have armed rebels, disrupted trade, and somehow taught a collective consciousness about the concept of weekends. How is that even possible? Asked Representative Thelmos of the Crystalline Hegemony. His body was made of living crystal, and right now that crystal was flickering with the colors of extreme confusion. The swarm has no individual minds. They cannot comprehend personal benefit. Apparently they can now. Zeranak pulled up a holographic display showing intercepted communications. The swarm has demanded reduced working hours, better nutrition, and something called casual Fridays. They have refused to participate in any military operations until these demands are met. The chamber erupted in chaos. Species that had been enemies for millennia found themselves united in complete bewilderment. How could anyone negotiate with a hive mind? How could a collective want personal time? The questions had no answers. A small holographic projection flickered to life near the back of the chamber. It showed a human woman with red hair and a friendly smile that made several delegates unconsciously step backward. This was Lisa Brennan, Earth's newly appointed ambassador to the Galactic Council. "Good morning, everyone," Lisa said cheerfully. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Ziranak's claws scraped against her console. "Ambassador Brennan, you have considerable nerve appearing before this council." "Thank you. I do try." Lisa's smile did not waver. "I understand there are some concerns about human activities in the galaxy. I'm here to address them." "Concerns?" Thelmos made a sound like breaking glass, which was how his species expressed disbelief. "You have destabilized half the known galaxy in 3 years. That seems like an exaggeration. Surely no more than a quarter." Ziranak slammed her fist against her console. "This is not amusing, Ambassador. The Council has reached the limit of its patience. Humanity must be contained before you destabilize the entire quadrant." Lisa tilted her head thoughtfully. "Contained. That's an interesting word choice. You mean you want to go back to the original plan of treating us like children who need supervision?" "We mean that humanity must accept restrictions on your activities, or the Council will be forced to take action." "Military action?" "If necessary." Lisa nodded slowly. She did not seem frightened or concerned. If anything, she seemed amused, which worried Ziranak more than any threat could have. "I should probably warn you about something," Lisa said. "I just spoke with our head of military operations, Admiral Kevin O'Brien. He's been watching this meeting through my feed." The chamber fell silent. Every delegate knew that name. Kevin O'Brien was the human who had designed the defense grid that had stopped a Varith probe fleet cold 6 months ago. He was considered one of the most dangerous military minds in the galaxy, and that assessment had come from Varith analysts who did not give such praise lightly. "What did he say?" Ziranak asked, though she suspected she did not want to know the answer. Lisa's smile widened. "He looked at your fleet deployments, all the ships you've been moving into position around human space. Then he grabbed a bottle of whiskey from his desk, handed it to his aide, and said 3 words. "What 3 words?" "Hold my beer." The effect was immediate. Across the war chamber, delegates began receiving alerts from their homeworlds. Threat detection systems were activating. Defense networks were going to high alert. On 12 different planets, emergency councils were being convened. Ziranak felt her scales go pale. "You cannot be serious." "Admiral O'Brien is always serious," Lisa said. "Well, almost always. There was that one time with the fermented fruit and the ambassador's pet, but that's another story." She leaned forward slightly, her holographic image seeming to grow larger in the chamber. "Here's the thing, High Commander. You can try to contain humanity. Many have tried throughout our history. It has never worked, and it has often ended badly for everyone involved. What alternative do you suggest? Try being friendly. You might be surprised how nice we can be when people aren't threatening to put us in a box." Lisa straightened up, her smile returning to its cheerful default. "Anyway, I should go. The Admiral wants to show me his new fleet deployment, and apparently there's some kind of celebration involving a whole lot of beer. Good luck with everything." Her hologram flickered out, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Ziranak stood very still for a long moment. Then she turned to her military advisor. "How quickly can we reinforce our border positions?" 6 days, High Commander. "Do it in 3. And find out everything you can about what happens after a human says that phrase." The advisor hesitated. "High Commander, our historical analysis suggests that events following that phrase are completely unpredictable. Then prepare for anything." But as Ziranak would soon learn, there was no way to prepare for what humans considered anything. The galaxy's threat level had just turned red, and it was about to get much, much worse. The Galactic Council had watched humanity for 300 years. They had placed observation satellites around Earth's sun, hidden listening posts on Mars, and sent countless probes to study this strange species that seemed to spend equal amounts of time creating beautiful art and blowing each other up. The Council had seen many young species before, but none quite like humans. Ambassador Vex Tall of the Zorani Collective was chosen to make first contact. He was considered the finest diplomat in the galaxy, having successfully negotiated peace between the Varth Imperium and the Crystalline hegemony after a war that had lasted 6,000 years. Surely, he thought, dealing with a primitive species that had only recently discovered how to leave their own planet would be simple. His fleet of 12 ships descended through Earth's atmosphere on a warm Tuesday morning, landing in the Nevada desert where the humans had prepared a greeting area. Vextal stepped out of his vessel and stretched his forearms, his silver skin gleaming in the harsh sunlight. Behind him, his delegation of advisors and guards followed in perfect formation. The humans waiting for them were not what he expected. There were only about 30 of them, standing in a loose group near some folding tables covered with food and drinks. They wore simple military uniforms, and none of them seemed particularly impressed by the alien spacecraft that had just landed in front of them. Commander Danny Martinez stepped forward to greet the aliens. He was a stocky man in his mid-40s, with dark hair going gray at the edges, and a face that looked like it smiled too often. He had an unlit cigar tucked behind his ear, which his superiors had told him to remove at least 4 times that morning. He had ignored them each time. "Welcome to Earth," Danny said, extending his hand. "I'm Commander Martinez. We've got sandwiches if you're hungry." Vextal stared at the offered hand with confusion. His translator device hummed as it processed the gesture, eventually identifying it as a greeting ritual. He reached out with one of his 4 hands and shook Danny's hand briefly. "I am Ambassador Vextal of the Zorani Collective, representing the Galactic Council of Aligned Species. We come bearing terms for your integration into the galactic community." "Terms?" Danny raised an eyebrow. "That sounds official. Want a beer while we talk about it?" Vextal did not want a beer. He wanted to deliver his message and return to his ship, where the air did not smell like dust and the sun did not burn his sensitive eyes. He gestured for one of his aides to bring forward a holographic projector, which flickered to life and displayed a complex star map. "Humanity has been observed and evaluated," Vextal announced in his most formal tone. "The Council has determined that your species meets the minimum requirements for contact but lacks the development necessary for full membership. Therefore, you will be assigned a Class 7 designation." Lieutenant Maria Santos, who stood just behind Danny, leaned forward with interest. She was a tall woman with sharp features and the kind of calm expression that came from having survived 3 combat deployments and 2 ex-husbands. "What does Class 7 mean exactly?" Vextal was pleased that at least one human was asking sensible questions. Class 7 species are granted protectorate status. This means the Council will defend you from external threats, provide limited technology assistance, and guide your development toward full membership over the next several thousand years. "That sounds nice," Danny said. "What's the catch?" "There is no catch. There are simply conditions." Vextal's translator struggled with the concept of a catch, but he pressed forward. "You will be prohibited from developing weapons beyond your current capabilities. You will be restricted from colonizing more than 3 star systems. You will pay tribute to the Council in the form of raw materials, specifically the heavy metals found in abundance on your outer planets. And you will accept Council oversight of your government's major decisions." The humans were silent for a moment. Danny scratched his chin thoughtfully while Maria made a sound that might have been a cough, but sounded suspiciously like a laugh. Let me make sure I understand, Danny said slowly. You flew across the entire galaxy to tell us that we're too stupid to handle ourselves. So you're going to take our stuff and tell us what to do for the next few thousand years. And we should be grateful for this. Vextal's silver face shifted in what his species used to express patience with lesser beings. We are offering you protection and guidance. The galaxy is a dangerous place, Commander. There are threats you cannot imagine. Without the Council's protection, humanity would likely destroy itself or be destroyed by others within a few centuries. We've been threatening to destroy ourselves for a while now, Danny admitted. Haven't managed it yet. This is precisely why you need oversight. Danny turned to look at Maria. She shrugged, her lips pressed together to keep from laughing. Around them, the other humans were exchanging glances that Vextal's cultural database could not interpret. Here's the thing. Ambassador, Danny said, reaching into the cooler beside the folding table. He pulled out a bottle of beer and held it up to the light. Humanity has this tradition. When someone tells us we can't do something, or that we need someone else to take care of us, or that we should just accept our place in the universe, we have a specific response. He handed the beer to Maria. Hold my beer, Danny said. Vextal's translator made a strange sound. Across the galaxy, on 17 different worlds, automated warning systems suddenly activated. Red lights began flashing in council chambers that had not seen alerts in centuries. On the Zerani homeworld, the Central Defense Computer upgraded humanity's threat assessment from negligible to monitor closely. Vextal did not understand what had just happened, but he felt a chill run down his spine despite the desert heat. I do not understand the significance of that phrase, he said carefully. Danny smiled. It was not a threatening smile. It was worse than that. It was the smile of someone who had just accepted a challenge that no one had officially issued. You will, Danny said. Now, let me tell you what's actually going to happen. We're going to politely decline your protectorate status. We're going to keep developing whatever weapons we want. We're going to colonize as many systems as we feel like colonizing. And we're definitely not going to pay tribute to anyone. Vextal's 4 hands clenched involuntarily. The Council will not accept this. There will be consequences. I'm sure there will be. Danny took the beer back from Maria and opened it with a satisfying pop. We look forward to it. That night, as Vextal's fleet departed Earth's orbit, he transmitted his report to the Council. He included everything: the strange greeting ritual, the casual attitude, the absolute refusal to accept reasonable terms, and most importantly, the phrase that had triggered every warning system in the collective. The Council debated for 6 days before reaching a conclusion. Humanity was no longer classified as a potential protectorate. They were classified as a potential threat. Observation would be increased. Contingency plans would be developed, and somewhere in the vast archives of galactic knowledge, a new entry was added to the cultural database. It reads simply, when humans say, hold my beer, prepare for the unexpected. Historical analysis suggests a 94.7% probability of subsequent events that defy logical prediction. Recommended response: retreat to safe distance and observe. The galaxy had just met humanity. It was not ready for what came next. The Varth Imperium decided to make an example of humanity. High Commander Ziranak assembled the largest military force in galactic history, 12,000 warships, each one carrying enough firepower to destroy a planet. They would descend upon a small human colony called Nexus 7, wipe it from existence, and show the galaxy what happened to species that refused to know their place. Nexus 7 was a young colony of just 50,000 people. It sat on the edge of human space, a small blue and green world that had been settled only 4 years earlier. The colonists were mostly farmers, scientists, and their families. They had no military installations, no defense grid, and no strategic importance whatsoever. That was precisely why Ziranak chose it. The attack would be quick, brutal, and impossible to prevent. Humanity would learn that their clever tricks and bold words meant nothing against true military might. Admiral Kevin O'Brien had other plans. He stood on the bridge of the Earth vessel Defiance, watching the tactical display that showed the approaching Varth fleet. The enemy ships appeared as a wall of red dots, so numerous that they seemed to blur together. Against them, the single green dot of the Defiance looked almost comical. "Sir," said Lieutenant Chris Palmer, the ship's tactical officer, "they outnumber us 300 to 1. Our reinforcements are still 2 days away." Kevin nodded slowly. He was a lean man with gray hair and calm eyes that never seemed to change, no matter what was happening around him. His crew found this calmness reassuring most of the time. Right now, facing 12,000 enemy warships, they found it slightly concerning. "I can count, Palmer. What's the plan?" Kevin took a long sip of his coffee. The bridge was quiet, except for the hum of the ship's systems and the soft beeping of the tactical display. Every officer was watching their commander, waiting to hear how they were supposed to survive the next few hours. "You know those experimental gravity mines we've been testing?" Kevin asked. Chris Palmer's face went pale. He knew exactly what mines the Admiral meant. They had been developed by Earth's most advanced research division, and every test had ended with the same recommendation: too dangerous to ever use in actual combat. The mines created temporary black holes that lasted only a few seconds, but during those seconds, they pulled in everything within 1,000 kilometers with irresistible force. "The ones that create temporary black holes?" Chris asked. "The ones that have a 15% containment failure rate?" "Those are the ones, sir." The Science Division said using them in combat could destroy our own ships just as easily as the enemy. Kevin handed his coffee mug to Chris. "Hold my beer." On the Varth flagship, High Commander Ziranak watched the single human vessel with contempt. She had expected at least a token resistance, a small fleet that she could crush as a warm-up exercise. Instead, there was just one ship, hanging in space between her armada and the defenseless colony. "What are they doing?" she asked her sensor officer. "Unknown, High Commander. The human vessel is deploying small objects into the space between our fleets. They appear to be some kind of mines, but our sensors cannot identify their exact nature." Ziranak laughed. It was a harsh sound, like rocks grinding together. "Mines? They think they can stop 12,000 ships with mines? Move the fleet forward. Destroy anything in our path." The Varth Armada surged toward Nexus 7. Their massive warships moved with terrible grace, weapons charging, shields glowing with deadly energy. Victory seemed certain. History would record this as the day humanity learned its place in the galaxy. Then the first gravity mine activated. It started as a small distortion in space, barely visible to the naked eye. Then it grew, pulling in light and matter with increasing force. A Varth destroyer that was passing nearby suddenly stopped moving forward. Its engines fired at full power, but it could not escape the invisible grip that was pulling it backward. Within seconds, the ship stretched like rubber and then vanished into a point of absolute darkness. More mines activated. Across the front of the Varth fleet, points of impossible gravity appeared without warning. Ships that had sailed the stars for centuries were pulled apart like paper. Others collided as they tried to escape, their navigation systems unable to compensate for the warped space around them. Ziranak stared at her tactical display in disbelief. Her perfect formation was dissolving into chaos. Ships were disappearing by the dozens, then by the hundreds. The carefully planned attack had become a desperate struggle for survival. "What is happening?" she screamed at her officers. "They're creating gravitational singularities." her science officer reported, his voice shaking. Temporary black holes. The space between our fleets has become a minefield of folded space-time. That's impossible. The energy required to create stable singularities would require more power than their entire civilization produces. They're not stable, High Commander. They only last a few seconds. But that's enough. On the Defiance, Kevin O'Brien watched with satisfaction as his plan unfolded. The mines were working even better than expected. Each singularity lasted only 4 seconds before collapsing, but in those 4 seconds, it created havoc that spread across the Vareth formation like ripples in a pond. "Sir," Chris Palmer said, his voice filled with amazement, "they're trying to retreat. Their fleet is breaking apart. Then let's give them something to remember us by." Kevin pointed at the tactical display. "Fire the second wave." More gravity mines launched from the Defiance. But these were different. They had been modified to activate in sequence, creating a chain reaction of singularities that rippled through space like a wave. What happened next would be studied by military academies for centuries. The chain reaction did not just destroy the remaining Vareth ships. It folded space itself, creating a temporary tunnel through reality that deposited the surviving enemy vessels in 17 different star systems. Some appeared in deep space, far from any help. Others appeared inside stars and were instantly vaporized. High Commander Ziranak found herself aboard her flagship, alone in an unfamiliar star system, with no idea what had just happened. Her fleet of 12,000 ships had been reduced to less than 100 scattered survivors. Back at Nexus 7, the colonists emerged from their shelters to find the sky empty of threats. Where the massive Vareth armada had been, there was only debris and silence. The single Earth vessel hung in orbit, its hull scorched but intact. Kevin O'Brien picked up his coffee mug from Chris Palmer's trembling hands. "Told you it would work," he said. The news spread across the galaxy within hours. A single human ship had defeated 12,000 Vareth warships using weapons that should not exist. The greatest military power in galactic history had been humiliated by a species that had been traveling between stars for less than 50 years. The Galactic Council held an emergency session. The Vareth Imperium, once so proud and aggressive, withdrew to their home systems and sealed their borders. Other species began sending diplomatic messages to Earth, suddenly eager to establish friendly relations. And for the first time in recorded history, the galaxy-wide threat assessment system went to maximum level, not because of an external invasion or a natural disaster, but because of 3 simple words that had become the most dangerous phrase in known space. "Hold my beer." The humans had proven that they could do the impossible. They had shown that no enemy was too large, no odds too great, and no situation too hopeless. The galaxy was beginning to understand that when humans faced destruction, they did not surrender or retreat. They got creative. And that was the most terrifying thing of all. After the disaster at Nexus 7, the Galactic Council realized that military force would not work against humanity. The humans had proven that they could turn any confrontation into something unexpected and dangerous. A new approach was needed. For 3 years, the Council assembled the greatest collection of minds in galactic history. Scientists from the Zerani Collective, philosophers from the Crystalline Hegemony, psychologists from 17 different species, and military strategists from what remained of the Vareth High Command. Their mission was simple: understand humanity and find their weakness. The research team, led by a Zerani scientist named Kelveth, studied everything they could find about humans. They analyzed human history, from their earliest civilizations to their expansion into space. They watched human entertainment, read human literature, and listened to human music. They interviewed captured humans, observed human colonies through hidden sensors, and even sent disguised agents to live among the humans. The agents did not last long. Something about human social gatherings, which they called parties, seemed to overwhelm even the most trained operatives. One agent returned to council space after 3 weeks, suffering from what he described as excessive friendliness exposure. Another disappeared entirely and was later found running a small restaurant in a human city, claiming she had never been happier. After 3 years, Kelveth was ready to present his findings. He stood before the full Galactic Council, his silver hands trembling as he activated his presentation display. "We have identified the source of human unpredictability," he announced. "It is not a single trait, but a combination of 2 factors that, when combined, create what can only be described as dangerous chaos." The council leaned forward, eager to finally understand their strange adversaries. "The first factor is what humans call stubbornness," Kelveth explained. "When a human is told that something is impossible, or that they cannot do something, their immediate response is to attempt that exact thing. This behavior is not logical. It does not serve their survival. Yet it appears in their history again and again, driving them to achieve things that no reasonable species would attempt." "And the second factor?" asked the current council chairman, an ancient crystalline elder named Morthax. "Boredom." Kelveth's voice was quiet, almost fearful. "When humans are not actively challenged, they become restless. They begin looking for problems to solve, even if no problems exist. They invent new technologies, start new projects, explore new territories. A bored human is constantly searching for something to do. These traits exist in other species," Morthax observed. "Why are humans different? Because in humans, these traits combine in a unique way." Kelveth pulled up a diagram showing 2 overlapping circles. When a human is both bored and faced with something they are told is impossible, they enter a state we have termed spite-based innovation. In this state, they will dedicate enormous resources to achieving the impossible thing, not because it benefits them, but because they want to prove that it can be done. The council was silent. This behavior made no sense to species that operated on logic and self-interest. "The gravity mines at Nexus 7 are a perfect example," Kelveth continued. "Human scientists were told that creating stable gravitational singularities was impossible. They spent 7 years developing a way to do it anyway. When asked why, they said it was interesting. Ziranak, still technically the Vareth representative despite her disgrace, sounded horrified. They created weapons capable of destroying entire fleets because it was interesting? Yes, and this is why military confrontation will never work. Every attack we make gives humans something to overcome. Every weapon we deploy gives them something to improve upon. We cannot defeat them through force because force only makes them more dangerous." Morthax's crystal body pulsed with troubled colors. "Then, what do you recommend?" Kelveth took a deep breath. "Diplomacy. Specifically, treating humans as equals and engaging them in mutually beneficial relationships. Our analysis suggests that when humans feel respected and valued, they become significantly less chaotic. They channel their energy into cooperative projects rather than competitive ones. You want us to surrender?" Ziranak demanded. "I want us to survive." Kelveth's voice was firm. "If we continue to treat humans as threats to be contained, they will eventually destroy us. Not out of malice, but simply because we give them something to push against. But if we make peace, if we become their friends rather than their enemies, they will direct that terrifying creativity toward goals that benefit everyone." The council debated for 6 standard cycles. Old rivalries and fresh wounds made agreement difficult. But eventually, fear of humanity overcame pride, and a decision was reached. The council would offer humanity full membership in the galactic community, complete with voting rights, territorial recognition, and equal standing with species that had been starfaring for millennia. Ambassador Lisa Brennan. Receive the offer aboard the diplomatic station Harmonies. Rest. The station floated in neutral space, between human territory and the Council's core worlds. A massive structure designed to host negotiations between species. Lisa sat in a comfortable chair, reading through the terms on a holographic display while sipping tea. Beside her sat Admiral Danny Martinez, now commanding the entire human military. He had gained some gray hair and a few more lines on his face since first contact, but the smile was the same. He watched Lisa read, occasionally glancing out the window at the stars. "This is actually reasonable," Lisa said, surprised. "They're offering us everything we asked for. Full membership, voting rights, no restrictions on our development. They're even offering to share their historical archives, including technology data." Danny nodded slowly. "It's a good deal." Lisa set down her tea. "Then why does it make me nervous?" "Because we're human and good deals make us suspicious." Danny leaned back in his chair. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe it's time we stopped being the galaxy's problem child and started being a responsible member of the community." "That doesn't sound like you." "I'm getting old, Lisa, and tired. I've spent the last 7 years fighting or preparing to fight. Maybe I'd like to see what happens when we try something different." Lisa studied his face for a moment, then nodded. She picked up the stylus to sign the agreement. At that exact moment, alarms began blaring throughout the station. A young officer burst through the doors, his face pale with fear. "Ambassador, Admiral, our deep space sensors have detected an unknown fleet entering the galaxy from the void between galaxies. Initial scans indicate over 100,000 vessels. They're heading directly for the galactic core." Danny was on his feet instantly. 100,000? "Are you sure?" "Yes, sir. And sir, there's something else. We've matched their energy signatures with historical records. They're the Void Walkers." The color drained from Lisa's face. She had read the Council archives. The Void Walkers were the reason the Council existed in the first place. An ancient enemy that had nearly destroyed galactic civilization 10,000 years ago. They consumed entire star systems, harvesting matter and energy to fuel their endless expansion. The last time they appeared, billions had died. "How many ships did it take to stop them last time?" Lisa asked quietly. "Every ship in the galaxy, fighting for 200 years. Danny's voice was grim. "And this fleet is 10 times larger than the last one." He turned to the officer. "Is that coffee in your hand?" "Sir, this really isn't the time for—" Danny took the cup from the young man's hands. He looked at Lisa, then out the window at the stars that suddenly seemed much darker than before. "Hold my beer," he said. Across the galaxy, every alarm system went to maximum alert. The Council that had just offered humanity peace now found themselves facing extinction. And humanity, which had spent the last 7 years as the galaxy's most unpredictable threat, was about to become its only hope. The Void Walkers had come, and the galaxy was falling apart. Species that had stood proud for thousands of years were fleeing their homeworlds, packing whatever they could carry onto ships and running toward the galactic rim. The Varath Imperium, once the mightiest military force in known space, retreated to their fortified systems and sealed their borders. The crystalline hegemony shattered themselves into millions of fragments and scattered across 1,000 hiding places, hoping to survive through dispersal. Even the Zorani Collective, who had always prided themselves on rational thinking and calm analysis, descended into panic. Their greatest scientists calculated that the galaxy had approximately 6 months before the Void Walkers reached the core systems. After that, there would be nothing left to save. Only the humans remained. Admiral Danny Martinez stood on the bridge of the newly commissioned Earth vessel Audacity, watching the tactical display that showed the approaching darkness. 100,000 enemy vessels moved through space like a wave of shadow, consuming everything in their path. Stars that had burned for billions of years went dark as the Void Walkers stripped them of energy dot against this impossible force. Humanity had gathered 800 ships. It was every vessel they had, from massive battleships to small patrol craft. Compared to the enemy armada, it was almost nothing. Compared to the forces that had gathered last time the Void Walkers came, it was a joke. "Danny," said Ambassador Lisa Brennan, who had refused to evacuate and now stood beside him on the bridge. "They're offering us a chance to surrender. They say they'll spare Earth if we stand aside and let them consume the rest of the galaxy." Danny laughed. It was not a bitter laugh or a desperate one. It was the laugh of a man who had been waiting his whole life for a challenge this big. And miss this? Not a chance. The odds are impossible. The odds are always impossible. Danny turned to face the main view screen, where the darkness of the Void Walker fleet was becoming visible against the stars. That's never stopped us before. He opened a channel to the entire human fleet. Every ship, every soldier, every crew member heard his voice at the same moment. "This is Admiral Martinez. I know what you're all thinking. We're outnumbered, outgunned. Every rational calculation says we should run. Our allies have abandoned us. The council that spent years trying to contain us is now hiding in bunkers, waiting to see if we can save them." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "But we're human. We've never been good at rational calculations. We're the species that looked at fire and thought, I can use that. We looked at the ocean and thought, I can cross that. We looked at the sky and thought, I can fly through that. We looked at the atom and thought, I can split that. We looked at the moon and thought, I can walk on that." He smiled. And even through the communication channel, his crew could feel the confidence in that smile. And now we're looking at an enemy that has never been defeated. An enemy that has destroyed civilizations for millions of years. And we're thinking, I can beat that. Across the fleet, humans began to cheer. On ships where moments ago there had been fear and despair, there was now something else. Something that other species had never understood about humanity. It was not courage exactly, though courage was part of it. It was the absolute refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible. "So here's the plan," Danny continued. "We're going to do what humans do best. We're going to improvise. We're going to adapt. We're going to overcome. We're going to fight with everything we have. And when that's not enough, we're going to invent something new. Right here. Right now. In the middle of the battle." Commander Maria Santos, now commanding her own ship in the fleet, spoke over the command channel. "Admiral, the Science Division is reporting that they have 3 new weapon systems ready for deployment. They said they were too dangerous to use in testing." "Perfect. Deploy all of them." "Sir, they haven't been tested at all." "Then this will be the test. If they work, we win. If they don't, we won't be around to file a complaint." Lieutenant Chris Palmer, now captain of the Defiance, added his voice. "Admiral, I have a crazy idea. The Void Walkers consume energy, right? What if we gave them too much energy at once? Like an entire star's worth?" Danny's eyes lit up. "Can we do that?" The Zorani left behind some of their stellar manipulation technology when they fled. If we modify our gravity mines to compress matter instead of pulling it apart, we might be able to create a temporary star right in the middle of their fleet. How temporary? About 4 seconds. Then it would explode. That's the most human thing I've ever heard. Do it. The battle began. 800 human ships charged into 100,000 Voidwalker vessels, and for a moment it looked like the end of everything. The enemy fleet moved to surround them, dark shapes blocking out the stars on every side. But humans were creative in ways that the Voidwalkers had never encountered. The first wave of untested weapons fired, sending pulses of energy that disrupted the enemy's communication systems. Void Walker ships that had moved as one for millions of years suddenly found themselves acting alone. Confused and vulnerable. Then the experimental gravity mines launched, modified to compress matter with impossible force. In the heart of the enemy fleet, a new star was born. It lived for exactly 3.7 seconds, a burning sphere of nuclear fire that vaporized everything within 10,000 kilometers. The Void Walkers adapted. They always did. But humans adapted faster. For 6 hours, the battle raged. Human ships fell by the dozens, their crews fighting until the last moment. But for every human vessel lost, hundreds of Void Walkers were destroyed by weapons that should not exist. Tactics that made no sense, and sheer stubborn refusal to surrender. At the battle's peak, when it looked like even human creativity might not be enough, Danny Martinez made one final broadcast. Not just to his fleet, but to the entire galaxy, using every communication channel available. Galaxy, this is Admiral Danny Martinez of Earth. I know you're watching. I know you're hiding. I don't blame you. This enemy is ancient and terrible, and fear is a reasonable response. He looked at Lisa Brennan, who stood beside him despite the damage alarms ringing throughout the ship. But today, humanity is going to show you something. We're going to show you that fear is not the only response. We're going to show you that when you face the impossible, you have a choice. You can run or you can fight. You can accept defeat or you can refuse it. He raised a bottle that he had kept in his quarters for exactly this moment. Galaxy, hold my beer. What happened next would be remembered forever. Humans across the fleet, inspired by their admiral's words, stopped following the battle plan and started improvising. They flew ships into enemy vessels, ejecting at the last second. They overloaded their reactors to create explosions that took out dozens of enemies at once. They found weaknesses in the Void Walker defenses that no rational analysis would have discovered, because no rational species would have tried such insane tactics. The Void Walkers, ancient and powerful beyond measure, encountered something they had never faced in millions of years of conquest. They encountered a species that fought harder when the odds got worse. A species that became more creative as the situation became more desperate. A species that saw extinction and responded with spite. When the last Void Walker vessel drifted lifeless through space, when the impossible victory had somehow been achieved, the silence was absolute. Across the galaxy, species that had hidden in fear emerged to find their worst nightmare destroyed by the species they had once tried to contain. Danny Martinez sat in his command chair, covered in dust and blood from a wound on his forehead. The Audacity was barely functioning, held together by emergency repairs and human stubbornness. Around him, his crew was crying and laughing and hugging each other. Lisa Brennan handed him his beer, which had somehow survived the battle undamaged. "You know," she said, "the galaxy is never going to look at us the same way again." Danny took a long drink. "Good. Maybe now they'll stop trying to tell us what we can't do." In the days that followed, the Galactic Council reformed around humanity, not as protectors or overseers, but as partners. The Vorath came out of hiding and offered their military to serve alongside human forces. The crystalline hegemony reformed and shared their ancient wisdom. The Zerani requested permission to study human psychology, hoping to understand the impossible things they had witnessed. And from that day forward, whenever a human said, "Hold my beer," the entire galaxy went to maximum threat level. Not out of fear anymore, but out of anticipation. Because when humans said those words, something incredible was about to happen. Something impossible was about to become possible. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Humans were not just dangerous. They were not just unpredictable. They were the species that looked at the universe and refused to accept its limitations. They were the species that turned spite into innovation and stubbornness into victory. They were humanity. And they were just getting started.